Story 1. The shadow standing behind my mother. In my hometown, there was one taboo that old people always warned children about. Never stare directly at a person's shadow in the mirror when you were alone in the room. When I was little, I didn't understand. I thought it was just something adults said to scare children away from looking into mirrors at night. But after what happened to my mother, I realized some shadows are not created by the living. Our house stood at the end of a dirt road beside an abandoned banana grove. It was an old house with moss-covered roof tiles and a cold brick floor all year round. In my mother's bedroom was a large wooden wardrobe with a long mirror attached to the door. The mirror had already become dark and cloudy with age. My mother treasured it very much, even though the mirror had faded and black stains spread along the edges. She still cleaned it every day. She used to say, "Old mirrors keep the traces of old people. You must never smash them carelessly." Those words always gave me chills. After my father died, my mother began suffering from insomnia. Every night around 3 a.m., she would wake up and sit in front of the mirror brushing her hair. The sound of the wooden comb sliding through her hair echoed in the darkness. Scratch, scratch, scratch? At first I thought she was grieving for my father. But later, things became stranger. One night, I got thirsty and walked past my mother's room. The door was slightly open. Inside, the lights were off, and only pale moonlight shone onto the mirror. I saw my mother sitting in front of it, her long hair hanging down while she brushed it slowly. But in the mirror, there was a man standing behind her. He was tall and thin, wearing an old white shirt, his head lowered slightly as if staring at the back of my mother's neck. I froze outside the door. I knew there was no one else in that room. I was about to call out when my mother suddenly spoke softly. "You came back?" The shadow inside the mirror did not answer. I stepped backward, my whole body freezing cold. The next morning, I asked my mother who she had been talking to the night before. She stared at me for a long time before saying, "Never look into a mirror at midnight. Whatever you see, don't stare directly at it." From that day on, my mother changed. She often stood alone in front of the mirror. Sometimes when I came home from school at noon, I would find her standing motionless in the room, her face close to the glass. Her lips moved as though she were talking to someone. One time, I clearly heard her whisper, "Don't take me away, my child is still young." Terrified, I ran to my uncle's house. After hearing my story, his face turned pale. He told me that the mirror had not originally belonged to my grandmother. It had been picked up after a funeral. The dead person was a woman from the village who had hanged herself in front of her dressing table. After her death, the family threw the mirror away in an empty field. My grandmother brought it home because she hated wasting things. My uncle said, "Mirrors that reflect the living for too long can trap the shadows of the dead, especially those who died tragically." That night, my uncle came to our house. He told my mother to throw the mirror away. But my mother clung to the wardrobe door and screamed, "No, he's inside there. He only came back to visit me." My uncle asked, "Who?" My mother slowly turned toward the mirror, tears streaming down her face. "My husband." I followed her gaze. Inside the mirror, behind my mother, the man in white appeared again. But this time, it was not my father's face. Its face was pale and stretched along, with sunken eyes and a mouth ripped wide open to the sides. It stood close behind my mother, both hands gripping her shoulders tightly. My uncle immediately dragged me outside while chanting Buddhist prayers under his breath. That night he stayed with us. My mother was forced to sleep in the living room, while her bedroom was locked. At exactly 2:47 a.m., we all heard the sound of a comb brushing hair coming from the bedroom. Scratch, scratch, scratch? But my mother was lying right in front of us. My uncle trembled as he took a flashlight and walked toward the bedroom door. The lock was still intact. He looked through the crack. Inside the room, sitting before the mirror, was a woman brushing her hair. Her long hair covered her face. A dark purple bruise circled her neck. My uncle grabbed me and ran out of the house that very night. The next morning, we returned with several neighbors. My mother was gone. The bedroom door stood wide open. The wardrobe remained there, A long crack split the mirror from top to bottom. And on the glass was a bloody handprint. People searched for my mother for 3 days. On the 4th day, they found her in the banana grove behind the house. She was standing against a tree trunk, eyes wide open, her mouth twisted into a strange smile. Around her neck was a dark bruise as though something had strangled her. The most horrifying thing happened when they prepared her body for burial. My uncle discovered 2 dark bruises shaped like hands on her shoulders, exactly where the shadow in the mirror had touched her. After the funeral, my uncle smashed the mirror. But the moment the hammer struck the glass, he screamed and fainted. When the mirror shattered, people saw clumps of human hair hidden beneath the silver backing. Long black hair tangled together in thick knots. After that, the house was abandoned. Many years later, I returned to sell the land. The house had decayed badly. The wardrobe was gone, but beneath the cracked floor of the bedroom, a small shard of mirror remained. I bent down and picked it up. Inside the tiny piece of glass, I saw my own face. And behind me, my mother was standing there. She wore her white burial clothes, her hair hanging over her shoulders, her deep black eyes staring directly at me. Her lips moved silently. Even without hearing her voice, I could read what she said. "Don't look directly at it." I immediately threw the shard into the well. But ever since that day, whenever I pass any mirror, I always feel as though someone is standing behind me. I never dare turn around. And I never dare stare. Because I know there are shadows that, once they are seen even once, will remember your face forever. Story 2. Room 307 has no guests. The hotel where I once worked as a receptionist stood near an old seaside tourist area. During the day, the place looked beautiful enough. But at night, the ocean wind blew through the long hallways, making the glass doors tremble like fingernails tapping against them. The hotel had 7 floors. I worked the night shift, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. On my first day, the manager warned me about 3 things. First, never go to the 3rd floor after midnight unless absolutely necessary. Second, if the internal phone from room 307 rings, never answer it. Third, if you see a human shadow in the mirror at the end of the 3rd floor hallway, do not stare directly at it. I thought he was joking, but his face was completely serious. Room 307 stood at the end of the 3rd floor corridor. According to the hotel records, the room had been locked for over 2 years because someone had committed suicide there. The victim was a young woman who rented the room alone and hanged herself in the bathroom using a towel. After that incident, guests staying near room 307 often complained about hearing a woman crying at night. Some even claimed they saw a girl with wet hair standing in front of the hallway mirror. I never believed in ghosts. Until the 7th night. At around 1:15 a.m., the phone at the reception desk rang. The screen displayed. A chill ran through my body. The phone kept ringing. I was alone in the lobby. Outside, heavy rain pounded against the windows, covering the glass with mist. I remembered the manager's warning and refused to answer. The ringing stopped. 10 seconds later, it started again. I still ignored it. The 3rd time, the ringing lasted longer. The sound became distorted, sometimes near, sometimes far away, as though it wasn't coming from the phone but from somewhere right behind my ear. Ring, ring, ring. I unplugged the phone, but it continued ringing. Terrified, I stepped backward. Even with the cord disconnected, the screen still glowed red. Then a woman's voice came through the speaker, soft and trembling. "Sir, please come upstairs, there's someone inside the mirror?" I froze. The voice repeated, "Sir, it's staring at me." Then the line went dead. I called the manager, but nobody answered. A moment later, the security camera feed from the 3rd floor flickered. The screen showed the 3rd floor hallway in darkness. The light at the far end blinked on and off. At the end of the hallway stood a large mirror facing the elevator. On the camera feed, I saw a woman standing before the mirror. Her wet hair hung over her shoulders. Her white nightgown clung tightly to her body as though she had just emerged from water. She stood with her back toward the camera, facing the mirror. But inside the mirror, She was facing the camera directly. I could barely breathe. Suddenly, the woman inside the mirror smiled. Then the camera feed cut out. I should have run away. But somehow, I grabbed the master key and went upstairs. It felt as though something was pulling me. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor. The doors opened. The hallway was freezing cold, filled with the smell of seawater and damp towels. The ceiling lights flickered weakly. The mirror at the end reflected the long corridor in a warped, distorted way. I walked slowly forward. Room 307 stood silent. But inside, I could hear running water. Splash, splash, splash. I pressed my ear against the door. A woman's voice whispered from the other side. "Can you see me?" I stumbled backward. The door to room 307 slowly creaked open by itself. Inside was complete darkness. A foul, damp smell drifted out. I turned on my phone flashlight. Dust covered the room. The bed was empty. The curtains were tightly closed. The sound of water came from the bathroom. My hands trembled so badly that the flashlight beam shook constantly. The bathroom door was slightly open. Inside, the shower was running even though no one had turned it on. The bathroom mirror was covered in steam. And written across the fogged surface in finger marks were the words, "Don't look behind you." I immediately froze. Because inside the mirror, behind me, stood a shadow. A woman standing extremely close. Her wet hair brushed against the back of my neck. I wanted to close my eyes. But I was too late. I had already stared directly at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale white. Her eyes were completely black, without any whites at all. Her neck bent unnaturally to one side as though broken. Her mouth slowly opened, black water spilling from it. Then she whispered, "You saw me." The lights went out instantly. I fainted. When I woke up, I was lying in the hotel lobby. The manager and security guards stood around me, their faces pale with fear. They said they found me standing motionless before the mirror at the end of the 3rd floor hallway, staring into it with wide open eyes. I quit my job the next day. But everything did not end there. From that night onward, wherever there was a mirror, I saw her. At first, only briefly. In the bathroom mirror, she stood behind the shower curtain. In the reflection of bus windows, she sat in the last seat. In the dark screen of my turned-off phone, she lowered her head behind my shoulder. I covered every mirror in my house with cloth. But one night, I woke up because I heard running water in the bathroom. I lived alone. I walked out and saw the bathroom door slightly open. The yellow light inside flickered weakly. The mirror above the sink was covered in steam. Written across it were the words, "Why won't you look at me anymore?" I stepped backward. Inside the mirror, she stood behind me. This time she wasn't far away. Her face hovered close beside my ear. She smiled and whispered, "You already saw me, now you have to stay with me." I smashed every mirror in my apartment. I thought destroying them would save me. But after the mirrors shattered, every shard on the floor reflected her face. Hundreds of black eyes stared up at me from the ground. I abandoned the apartment and rented a small room with no mirrors. I covered my phone screen with tape. I avoided glass windows. I refused to look into water. But some things do not need mirrors to appear. One night during a blackout, I sat alone in the darkness while rain leaked through the window onto the floor. Inside a small puddle beneath my feet, I saw the shadow of someone standing behind me. I shut my eyes tightly. Then her voice whispered, "It's too late." An icy hand touched my shoulder. Ever since then, I sleep facing the wall every night. I never open my eyes when I hear running water. I never look into any reflective surface. But I know she is still there, standing behind me, waiting for me to accidentally look again. Because the hotel manager was right. There are shadows inside mirrors that do not want to be set free. They only want another person to see them, so they won't be alone in the darkness anymore. Story 3. The thing that came out of the old mirror. When I was 19 years old, I moved into an old boarding house on the outskirts of the city. The rent was unbelievably cheap. So cheap that anyone who heard the price immediately found it suspicious. The landlady was a skinny woman in her 60s who always wore dark brown clothes. When she showed me the room, she said only one thing. "There's an old mirror in there. If you hear knocking on the glass at night, don't answer it." I thought she was just superstitious and laughed it off. My room was at the end of the second-floor hallway. It was small, with yellowed walls and water stains spreading across the ceiling. The most noticeable thing inside was a large mirror standing against the wall opposite the bed. The mirror was almost as tall as a person, framed in black wood with peeling paint. The surface was cloudy with age, but it still reflected clearly enough. On the very first night, I noticed something strange. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint clicking sound. Knock. 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 I opened my eyes. The room was dark except for dim street light coming through the window. The sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time I realized it was coming from the mirror. I turned on my phone flashlight and looked around. Nothing. I assumed the wooden frame was expanding because of the cold weather and tried to go back to sleep. But the moment I closed my eyes, bang! A loud knock echoed directly against the glass. I sat upright instantly. In the dim light, I saw a shadow standing in the corner of the room inside the mirror. It was not my shadow. The figure was tall and thin, its head hanging low, standing motionless behind me inside the reflection. I spun around immediately. There was no one behind me. When I looked back at the mirror, the shadow had vanished. My entire body turned cold. The next morning, I asked the other tenants about the room, but everyone avoided the subject. A boy staying across the hall quietly muttered, "Someone died in there before." I tried asking more questions, but he refused to continue. Over the next few days, stranger things began happening. Every morning when I woke up, handprints appeared on the mirror. The fingers were unusually long, like the hands of someone who had been soaking in water for too long. Sometimes while studying at night, I heard breathing behind me. Ha, ha, ha. Whenever I turned around, nobody was there. But inside the mirror, a pale face occasionally flashed behind me before disappearing. I began losing sleep. Every time I walked past the mirror, I felt as though something inside was staring at me. One afternoon while cleaning it, I noticed faint words scratched into the lower corner of the glass. "Don't let it out." A chill ran through me. That evening I went downstairs to ask the landlady about it. The moment she heard about the words, her face lost all color. She pulled me into her room and told me the truth. Years ago, the room had been rented by an art student named Khan. He was quiet and isolated himself from everyone else. He spent most of his time painting while sitting in front of the mirror. After a while, Khan began saying there was someone else inside it. At first everyone assumed he had gone insane. But later, people living nearby started hearing conversations in his room at night even though he lived alone. Then one day, they found him dead. He had hanged himself directly in front of the mirror. The horrifying part was that the glass was covered in scratch marks, as though something had tried to crawl out from inside. After his death, every tenant who rented the room eventually left because of strange experiences. Some claimed they saw Khan's shadow wandering the hallway at night. Others said the mirror's reflection moved several seconds slower than reality. After hearing the story, I wanted to move out immediately. But I had already paid for the entire month, so I forced myself to stay a little longer. The 12th night, it was raining heavily. The power went out around 1 a.m. I lay on the bed listening to the rain slam against the windows. Then I heard laughter. A very soft laugh in the darkness. Heh, heh, heh. I sat up immediately. The laughter was coming from the mirror. I turned on my phone flashlight. Inside the mirror, I was still sitting on the bed. But my reflection was smiling. In real life, I wasn't smiling at all. I froze in terror. The version of me inside the mirror slowly stood up. It tilted its head and stared at me before walking toward the glass. Tap. One of its hands pressed against the other side of the mirror. I backed into the wall. The figure still wore my face. but its eyes were completely black like endless empty holes. It smiled. Then it began pounding on the glass. Bang! 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 The mirror shook violently. I screamed and ran toward the door, but it would not open. It felt as though someone outside was holding it shut. The pounding grew louder and louder. Crack! A fracture spread across the mirror. And through the crack, a pale white finger slowly pushed out. In panic, I grabbed a chair and hurled it at the mirror. Crash! The mirror exploded into pieces. At that exact moment, the electricity returned. The room became silent. Broken glass covered the floor. I stood there trembling violently. Then I realized something horrifying. In the shattered pieces of mirror beneath my feet, there was no reflection of me. Every shard reflected only the empty room. I could no longer see myself. And then, from behind me, came a quiet laugh. I turned around. Someone identical to me stood in the corner of the room. It smiled crookedly. And somehow, I suddenly saw myself trapped inside the broken shards on the floor. I was inside the mirror. I slammed desperately against the glass, screaming, but nobody could hear me. The other thing walked over to my bed, sat down, and stared directly at me through the fragments. Then it whispered. Finally switched places. That was 7 years ago. I am still trapped inside mirrors. I can see everything through the glass, strange rooms. Strangers looking into mirrors every day without realizing something is staring back at them. Sometimes I try pounding against the glass to warn them. Knock. 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 But people always assume it is just wood creaking in the night. The worst part is, I am not the only thing trapped here. In the darkness behind mirrors, many things are moving. And whenever someone stares too long into a mirror at midnight, they begin staring back. Story 4. The Faceless Child in the Mirror. I once worked as a babysitter for a wealthy family living in the suburbs. Their mansion was enormous, 3 stories tall, filled with dark wooden furniture. The parents were both doctors who traveled frequently for work. They hired me to take care of their 5-year-old daughter. Anne was a very strange child. She barely spoke and almost never smiled. But the strangest thing about her was how terrified she was of mirrors. The house was filled with decorative mirrors, yet every time she passed one, she either lowered her head or ran past it as quickly as possible. One day I asked her, "Why are you afraid of mirrors?" And whispered, "Because there's another child inside them." I laughed, assuming it was just childish imagination. Until one evening. That night Anne's parents were away on a business trip. After putting her to bed, I went downstairs to get some water. When I came back up to the 2nd floor, I heard someone talking inside Anne's room. One voice belonged to Anne. The other voice was soft, strange. I opened the door and stepped inside. Anne was sitting on her bed, staring toward the large mirror beside the wardrobe. She said quietly, "She saw you." I asked, "Who are you talking to?" Anne slowly turned toward me, her face pale. "It's standing behind you." A cold wave rushed through my body. I slowly turned toward the mirror. Inside the reflection, behind me, stood a child. She wore the same white dress as Anne. But she had no face. Her head was nothing but smooth pale skin. I screamed and spun around. Nothing was there. When I looked back at the mirror, the faceless child had disappeared. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard the sound of children's footsteps running through the hallway. Tap tap tap. Tap tap tap. I opened the door and saw Anne standing before the mirror at the end of the corridor. Her back faced me. "Anne?" I called softly. She didn't respond. I walked toward her and reached for her shoulder. Then froze. Inside the mirror, Anne was still standing motionless. But the head of the reflection slowly turned toward me. It had no face. Only a massive black mouth splitting open across the blank skin. The mouth smiled. I grabbed Anne and dragged her back into the room before locking the door. Anne trembled violently in my arms. "It wants to take my face." I asked her how long she had been seeing it. She said it started when her family moved into the mansion. Every night, The child in the mirror stood beside her bed watching her sleep. At first it had a face. But day by day, the face slowly disappeared. Then it began whispering, "If you look at me long enough, I'll have your face instead." I decided to call Anne's parents, but nobody answered. At that exact moment, every light in the mansion went out. Children's laughter echoed through the hallway. Hee hee hee. Then came knocking sounds from every mirror in the house. Knock, 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 as though dozens of hands were tapping against the glass at the same time. And burst into tears. "It's here." A rotten, foul smell drifted into the room. I looked toward the mirror beside the wardrobe. Inside it stood dozens of faceless children crowded behind us. They slowly lifted their heads together. Then every single one pointed directly at Anne. A voice echoed from inside the mirror. "Give my face back." The mirror began shaking violently. Pale hands slowly pushed through the glass from the other side. I grabbed Anne and ran out of the room. But the hallway was already filled with faceless children. They did not walk. They glided across the floor as though floating. I dragged Anne downstairs while the sound of shattering glass exploded throughout the mansion. Crash. 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 The white figures began crawling out from the mirrors. I tried opening the front door, but it would not move. At that moment, Anne suddenly screamed, "Don't look at its face." I shut my eyes immediately. An icy gust brushed past my face. Laughter echoed directly beside my ear. I didn't dare open my eyes. Not until I heard a car horn outside the gate. Anne's parents had returned. When the lights came back on, everything disappeared. The faceless children were gone. But every mirror in the mansion was cracked. I quit my job the next morning. A month later, I read in the news that the mansion had burned down in the middle of the night. The entire family disappeared. Anne's body was never found. Inside her bedroom, investigators discovered a blackened mirror among the ruins. Small children's handprints covered the glass. And within the dark smoke stains on the mirror, there was the smiling face of a little child. Story 5. The woman in the mirror. WHO never blinked. I once worked the night shift at a private hospital in the middle of the city. The department where I worked was located on the 6th floor and specialized in emergency admissions during the night. During the day, the place was crowded and noisy. But after midnight, the long white hallways became almost completely silent. Only the sounds of breathing machines, rolling stretchers, and the cold smell of disinfectant remained. At the end of the hallway was the women's restroom. Inside it hung a massive mirror. All the nurses on that floor avoided looking into that mirror after 3 a.m. When I first started working there, I asked why. The head nurse answered quietly, "If you see the woman inside the mirror, never look directly into her eyes." I thought it was just another ghost story hospital workers used to scare newcomers. Until my 13th night shift. That night, heavy rain hammered the building. Around 3 a.m., I was alone at the station because everyone else was busy inside the emergency room. As I entered patient records into the computer, I heard the sound of slippers dragging across the hallway. Shuffle, shuffle. The sound was slow, wet, as though someone barefoot was walking through puddles. I looked up. No one was there. But the footsteps continued, stopping directly outside the women's restroom. Then silence. An uncomfortable chill crawled down my spine. A few moments later, the internal phone rang. The call was coming from the restroom. I picked up the receiver. No voice answered. Only breathing. H-H-H-H. 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 I asked, "Who is this?" No response. Then a woman's voice whispered softly, "Have you seen me yet?" The line disconnected. I immediately tried calling security, but nobody answered. At that exact moment, all the hallway lights flickered violently. Beep, beep, beep. The computer monitor in front of me distorted with static before turning black. And inside the dark reflection of the screen, I saw a woman standing behind me. Her long black hair covered most of her face. The most horrifying thing was, she never blinked. I spun around immediately. No one was there. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Trying to calm myself, I walked into the hallway. The emergency lights cast dim red glows across the white walls, making the entire hospital floor feel like a giant sleeping corpse. As I passed the women's restroom, I heard running water. Splash, splash, splash. The restroom door stood slightly open. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The sharp smell of bleach filled the air. The lights flickered weakly overhead. And standing before the large mirror was a woman. She wore a pale blue hospital gown. Her long black hair hung soaking wet around her body. Her skin was white like waterlogged flesh. She stood with her back facing me. I asked shakily, "Who are you?" The woman did not answer. But inside the mirror, I could see her face. Her skin was deathly pale. Her eyes were stretched wide open. And just as the head nurse had warned me, she never blinked. 1 second. 2 seconds. 10 seconds. Those eyes remained wide open, staring directly into mine. Then her mouth slowly stretched into a smile. A smile that widened all the way to her ears. I stumbled backward in horror. The woman standing in reality never moved. But inside the mirror, she began walking toward me. One slow step at a time. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. The woman inside the reflection came closer and closer while the real figure remained perfectly still. Until finally, the face in the mirror pressed itself against the glass. Bang! A violent crash shook the mirror. I screamed and ran out of the restroom. At that same instant, every hallway light went black. Darkness swallowed the floor. Then I heard the dragging footsteps behind me. Shuffle, shuffle. It was following me. I ran as fast as I could toward the nurse station. But when I arrived, I froze in terror. On the security monitor, I saw myself still standing inside the restroom. And the thing running through the hallway toward the station was not me. It was the woman. I slowly turned my head. She stood at the far end of the corridor. Her neck bent unnaturally to one side. Her eyes stretched impossibly wide. She did not run. But every time the lights flickered, she appeared several meters closer. Darkness. Light. 10 meters away. Darkness. Light. 5 meters away. Darkness. Light. She was standing directly in front of me. The smell of stagnant water and rotting flesh filled the air. She stared at me without blinking. Then she slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the security monitor. I looked. On the screen, me inside the restroom slowly turned toward the camera and smiled. At that exact moment, the head nurse and security guards rushed into the hallway. The lights came back on. The woman vanished. I collapsed onto the floor. After that night, I finally learned the truth. Years earlier, a mentally unstable female patient had been admitted to the 6th floor after repeatedly claiming that a woman inside the mirror was following her. Nobody believed her. Until one night she tore out her own eyes inside the restroom and bled to death. Before dying, she screamed over and over, "She never blinks. Don't look into her eyes." After her death, many night shift workers experienced strange things. Some saw a long-haired woman inside mirrors. Others heard dragging footsteps around 3 a.m. One nurse lost her sanity after staring too long into the restroom mirror. Before being transferred away, she kept repeating, "If you stare into its eyes too long, it remembers your face." I resigned from the hospital a month later. But it never ended. Since then, every time I look into a mirror, I see the woman somewhere behind me. At first she appeared far away. Then slowly, she grew closer. In bathroom mirrors. In train windows. In black television screens. She always stared at me with those wide-open eyes that never blinked. I became obsessed. I started timing how long she could keep her eyes open. 1 minute. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. She never blinked. Then one night, while brushing my teeth, I saw her standing directly behind me in the bathroom mirror. And for the very first time, she blinked. Click. At that exact moment, every light in my apartment went out. I felt icy breath against the back of my neck. Then a woman whispered beside my ear. "Now, it's your turn." I never turned around. Even now, I live alone in an apartment where every mirror is covered with cloth. I no longer look into mirrors. I never use front-facing cameras. I avoid glass windows at night. But sometimes, while walking past tall buildings during rainy nights, I accidentally catch my reflection in the dark glass. And behind me, she is always there, eyes stretched wide open, never blinking, waiting for me to stare just a little longer. Just a little.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.